Hello everyone and welcome back to Trail of Secret. I know many of you use these videos to unwind or even fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. The gas station was a dimly lit relic of a time long past, nestled on the outskirts of nowhere. Nathan pulled up, the engine of his car sputtering a few final breaths before it died. The tires ground to a halt on the cracked asphalt, and the faint scent of gasoline mingled with the musty smell of rain-soaked dirt. The place was a ghost of its former self. Paint peeling from the walls, a single flickering light above the door, and a lone, weary pump that had seen better days. The hum of the fluorescent lights inside echoed eerily, and the wind outside carried a chill that prickled at Nathan's skin despite the summer heat. The distant sound of crickets filled the air, blending with the soft rustle of leaves as they brushed against the cracked windows of the station. Nathan leaned against the car, staring at the desolate gas station. His heart was racing, but not from exertion. The place felt off. A strange quietness hung in the air, one that made his gut tighten. He'd been on the road for hours, desperate for a break, and this abandoned pit stop seemed like the only option. But the silence here was suffocating. Nathan's thoughts swirled with unease, wondering why this was the only gas station for miles, why it seemed so dead. The low hum of the lights didn't comfort him. He stepped forward, the gravel crunching underfoot, the weight of the evening pressing on his chest. As he walked inside, the door creaked open, the noise too sharp in the stillness. The interior looked like something out of an old film. Dusty shelves, a lone register, and a yellowed calendar on the wall. Nathan's eyes scanned the space, his senses heightened as he moved toward the counter. A middle-aged man stood behind it, his face partially obscured by a shadow. His hair was graying, his clothes unremarkable, but there was something in his eyes, a coldness, a distance, as if he wasn't entirely present. "Long way from anywhere, aren't you?" the man said, his voice gravelly, like he'd been smoking for decades. Nathan didn't respond immediately, instead choosing to stare at the man for a moment. There was something off about him. His presence seemed to fill the room, making Nathan feel smaller than usual. "Need a drink or something?" The man's voice broke Nathan's thoughts, but he couldn't shake the strange feeling that washed over him. He forced a nod, walking toward the cooler. "You're heading up to Route 66? The man asked as Nathan opened the door to grab a bottle. "Yeah," Nathan muttered, trying to dismiss the uneasy feeling. "Just passing through." The man's eyes flicked over him. "You better watch the road," he said in a low tone, his voice suddenly shifting. It was a warning, but it wasn't just for the road. There was something heavier in his words, something cryptic. Nathan felt a chill settle in his chest, but he nodded and grabbed the drink, paying with a few crumpled bills. As he turned to leave, the man's voice stopped him again. "You know, there are places out there you don't want to visit," he said, almost too quietly. Nathan glanced back, but the man was staring at the ground now, almost as if he regretted speaking. A sense of dread settled over Nathan like a cloud, thickening the air. Nathan stepped back into the night, the cool air brushing against his face. His car felt like a haven, a place of temporary escape. But as he slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, he felt the man's words echoing in his mind. "You better watch the road." Nathan pushed the thought away, but the feeling lingered. He drove, the headlights cutting through the darkened landscape ahead. There was nothing for miles, no sign of life or civilization, just the blackness of the open road and the steady hum of his tires on the pavement. Suddenly, a flicker of light caught his attention. A figure stood at the edge of the road, tall, thin, and draped in dark clothes. Nathan's hands tightened on the wheel as he passed by, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. The figure didn't move, just stood there, staring after him. A chill ran down Nathan's spine. He shook his head. It had to be a trick of the light, maybe someone who had wandered out of the woods. But even as he tried to rationalize it, the feeling of being watched returned, creeping into the pit of his stomach. He pressed the gas pedal, but the car seemed to slow down, as though the engine was struggling against him. Then it happened. The car behind him flickered into view in his rearview mirror. A dark, unmarked vehicle that had been following him at a distance. Nathan's heart skipped a beat. He had been driving alone for hours. There hadn't been anyone on this stretch of road for miles. He didn't panic, at least not immediately. He tried to calm himself, telling himself it was just another driver, maybe someone headed to the same place. But the car seemed to hang behind him, not overtaking, just following. Nathan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. His breath hitched. Something was wrong. The feeling of being pursued began to settle in Nathan's bones. He couldn't shake the unsettling sensation that the car behind him was too deliberate in its movements. It wasn't following in a normal, casual way. No, it was tailing him with purpose. His eyes flicked between the rearview mirror and the road ahead, his foot pressing lightly on the gas as he tried to push the thoughts from his mind. The road stretched ahead, endless and desolate, but the sense of someone on his tail felt suffocating. Every corner he turned, every straightaway he cruised down, the dark car remained in the background just within his line of sight. His heartbeat had quickened, each thud reverberating in his ears. Just focus on the road, he told himself, trying to push the dread down. It's probably just another traveler. Maybe they're lost too, but the thoughts gnawed at him, clawing at his sanity. The stretch of road he was on had no exits for miles, no side streets to turn off into. The headlights behind him were too bright, too constant. There was no way this driver was unaware of how close they were. Nathan's knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel tighter. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, he thought, trying to calm his racing heart. Maybe they're just trying to get to the next town. He pressed harder on the accelerator, the engine humming louder as his car picked up speed. But the shadow of the car behind him seemed to match his pace like an unyielding presence that refused to leave him alone. Suddenly, the headlights behind him flashed once, briefly, almost like a signal. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. His pulse hammered as a sudden cold sweat slicked his palms. His mind raced. Was that a warning? Was someone trying to tell him something? Or was it a coincidence? It didn't feel like one. He decided to take action. He couldn't stand the paranoia any longer. The next exit, there was one finally, would be his chance to lose whoever was behind him. He slammed his foot down, the tires screeching as he veered off the highway onto a dark, winding road that disappeared into the trees. But the car behind him did not hesitate. It followed, unwavering. It wasn't just tailing him. It was pursuing him. Nathan's heart pounded harder. He forced his focus on the road ahead, trying to navigate the turns in the dark as best he could, but his hands shook. His breath was shallow, his vision narrowing as his anxiety began to claw at him. His mind raced. What if they want something? What if this is not just an accident? Then something even stranger happened. As he made a sharp turn around a bend, he noticed the silhouette of a person on the side of the road, right in the periphery of his headlights. It was the figure from the gas station, the tall, thin figure that had stared after him as he drove away. The man with the cryptic warning. Nathan's foot lifted from the accelerator, his hands trembling on the wheel. The figure hadn't moved. It was standing perfectly still, watching him with an unsettling calmness. As he sped past, his eyes were fixed on the man, and for a split second, just a second, he could have sworn the figure's eyes locked with his in the rearview mirror. He had no time to process what he had just seen. The car behind him had closed. The gap. Almost too quickly, and now the headlights were so close it felt like the other driver was breathing down his neck. There was nowhere to go but forward. Nathan turned sharply, desperately trying to lose his pursuer. The road twisted further into the woods, growing more treacherous with every turn. He felt the tires slipping slightly on the wet asphalt. His pulse raced and his mind screamed at him to stop, to just stop and figure this out. But he couldn't. The car behind him wouldn't stop. The chase was relentless. The headlights flashed again, this time more urgently. Nathan's hands were slick with sweat, his chest tightening as the figure in the rearview mirror loomed closer. He swerved again, but this time his car didn't respond the way it should. The back tires slid across the wet pavement, and with a jarring jolt his car spun out of control, careening off the road and into the trees. The world around him tilted. The screech of the tires, the sound of branches snapping, the horrifying sensation of weightlessness. They all flooded his senses as the car finally slammed into a large tree, halting abruptly with a violent crash. Nathan's head hit the steering wheel hard, and everything went black. When Nathan regained consciousness, the first thing he noticed was the silence. Complete silence. His head throbbed as if he'd been hit by a freight train. His body was stiff and sore, his mind foggy, but as he blinked the disorientation away, his gaze fell upon the surroundings. The car was mangled, the front end crushed, but somehow it hadn't caught fire. The trees around him loomed like dark sentinels, their branches swaying gently in the night breeze. It felt like the woods had swallowed him whole. His hands were still shaking as he unbuckled the seatbelt and tried to push the door open. It was stuck, wedged against the tree, but with a grunt of effort he managed to force it open enough to crawl out. Outside, the world was eerily still. The night was too quiet, the air too thick. The darkness was absolute, oppressive. His car was a wreck, but there was no sign of the pursuing vehicle, no sign of anything except for the wind through the trees and the faint sound of his own ragged breathing. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest. Where are they? His mind was racing. He had to get out of here. He stumbled away from the wreck, his legs unsteady, his mind refusing to cooperate as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. His pulse thundered in his ears as he glanced around. That's when he saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the tree line. The same tall, thin figure from earlier. The man. The one who had warned him at the gas station. Nathan froze, his breath caught in his throat. The man took a step forward, and Nathan's heart leaped in his chest. He took a shaky step backward, but before he could turn to flee, the man's voice broke the silence, smooth and cold. You shouldn't have come here, Nathan. Some roads lead nowhere, and some lead to the past. The man's voice was like a whisper carried by the wind, but it had an eerie clarity. Nathan's head spun. How did he know my name? A flash of light illuminated the woods, and Nathan spun around. The dark car. It had reappeared. The headlights illuminated everything in a harsh glow, and Nathan's eyes widened as he saw the driver, a figure wearing the same dark clothes as the man. They were one and the same. It was all connected. Then, the truth hit him. This wasn't just an encounter with a stranger. It wasn't an accident. The man wasn't warning him. He was leading him back to something long buried. Nathan's head spun with confusion and fear as the man's words lingered in the air, like a chill that wouldn't leave his skin. He couldn't make sense of any of this. Some roads lead nowhere, and some lead to the past. What did it mean? How did this man know him? His body trembled, but he couldn't stop himself from taking a step forward, his mind screaming for answers he wasn't sure he was ready to hear. The dark car's headlights blazed like twin eyes watching him. The air felt heavy, suffocating. His thoughts swirled in chaotic circles. This wasn't just some random encounter. This was personal. Nathan could feel it in his gut. The man, the car, the warnings, they were all connected. But to what? He took another shaky step, his feet almost unwilling to carry him toward the man, but he had no choice. The pull of the unknown was too strong. The trees around him seemed to close in, their branches reaching out as though trying to stop him from finding out the truth. Who are you? Nathan's voice cracked as he forced the words out. How do you know me? The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a slow step forward, his long shadow stretching across the forest floor. Nathan flinched, but his eyes never left the stranger. You really don't remember, do you? The man's voice was almost mocking, but there was an undercurrent of something darker in it. Nathan's mind raced. Remember what? He thought he was going crazy. He had no memory of ever meeting this man before tonight. Suddenly, a flash of memory hit him, an image of a woman's face, pale and bloodied, staring at him from the darkness of a cold night. His heart skipped a beat. Who was that woman? Who was she? Nathan asked, his voice low, a shiver running down his spine. The man's lips twitched into a faint, unsettling smile. You've forgotten her already? How convenient. Nathan's pulse quickened as his eyes darted between the man and the car. What is he talking about? The man stepped closer, the air around him growing colder. She was the one who warned you. She was the one who tried to stop you from coming back here. Coming back? Nathan's mind reeled. He had never been here before, or had he? His knees weakened, and he stumbled backward, his mind a blur of images and feelings he couldn't fully grasp. The trees, the road, the car, the figure, it was all coming back in flashes like a puzzle he couldn't piece together. The man reached into his coat and pulled out an old, worn photograph, holding it out for Nathan to see. This is your last chance, Nathan. If you don't remember now, you never will. Nathan's heart slammed against his chest as he stared at the photo. It was of a small town, dusty streets, an old gas station, the same stretch of highway he had just driven on. But there, in the center of the image, stood a young woman. A woman who looked eerily familiar. It was her. The woman from his memory. The woman who had been in the accident. Nathan's breath caught in his throat as the pieces started to fall into place. No. This can't be real. You're not just some random stranger, Nathan whispered, the realization dawning on him. You were there. You were there that night. The man nodded slowly, his expression darkening. You don't remember, but I do. I remember everything. Nathan's stomach churned. He could barely keep his legs beneath him as he tried to process what the man was saying. You were involved in that accident, Nathan, the man continued. It was no accident. The woman you saw, the woman you've forgotten, wasn't just someone who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was meant to die, and you were the reason. The words hit Nathan like a physical blow, and he staggered backward, his mind racing for something to hold on to, something to keep him grounded. But there was nothing. He was falling into an abyss of forgotten memories and lies. I didn't... Nathan stammered, his mind spinning. He couldn't understand. The memory was a blur. He didn't remember being in any accident, let alone causing one. He had to be wrong. This man was lying. The man's gaze hardened and he stepped closer, his voice colder than ever. It's too late to deny it. You killed her, Nathan, and now the past is here to collect its due. Nathan's breath caught in his throat, and he shook his head desperately. No, that's not true. You know it's true. The man's voice was like a whisper in the wind. The woman who warned you, her name was Emma. She was your wife. The ground beneath Nathan's feet seemed to crack open. He stumbled, his vision going black for a moment. The air around him turned to ice, and the world seemed to tilt. Emma. The name echoed in his head. His wife? The flash of memory hit him again, stronger this time. He saw her face, her warm smile, her soft eyes, her laugh. He remembered now. He had loved her. And he had lost her. No, he hadn't just lost her. He had caused her death. A memory flooded his mind. One of him, drunk, arguing with Emma in the car. A storm had been brewing, the roads slick with rain. She had begged him to stop driving, but he had ignored her. He had been too angry, too out of control. The crash had happened so fast, so violently, and in that moment, Emma had disappeared from his life forever. The man's words rang in his ears like a curse. You can never outrun your past, Nathan, no matter how hard you try. The man turned away, fading into the shadows of the trees as Nathan stood frozen, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of the truth. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. His entire world had shattered. Pieces of his life he had forgotten. Pieces he had buried deep had now come rushing back to him. The crash, the woman, the warning, everything. The consequences of his actions had followed him, and now it was too late to escape. Nathan's legs buckled and he collapsed to his knees on the cold earth, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The car was gone now. The man was gone. But the past lingered like a shadow, and there was no running from it. As he sat there alone in the forest, his mind whirled with unanswered questions. Who had that man really been? Why had he appeared to Nathan now? Had it all been a warning, or was there something else at play? Was there a greater purpose to the strange events that had led Nathan here? The answers remained elusive, hanging in the air like the fog around him. The man's cryptic words echoed in his mind. You can never outrun your past. Nathan sat there for what felt like an eternity, but the answers never came. Only the chilling silence, the dark woods, and the sound of his own breathing. And as the night stretched on, Nathan wondered if he had truly escaped his past, or if it was waiting for him, just around the corner, ready to claim him once again. What do you think really happened? Was Nathan truly trapped by his past, or was there something more sinister at play? Let me know in the comments below. Story number 2. A cold wind snakes through the towering iron gates of Blackthorn Manor, a once grand estate now crumbling under the weight of time. Ivy strangles the stone walls, and shattered windows stare like hollow eyes into the fog-drenched night. The full moon casts an eerie glow on the overgrown garden, where statues of faceless angels stand frozen in silent judgment. A storm brews in the distance, thunder rumbling like a warning. Eleanor Graves hesitates at the mansion's threshold, gripping the worn leather strap of her satchel. A journalist known for chasing the truth where others wouldn't dare, she has spent years exposing the dark secrets of forgotten places. But this time, it's personal. Blackthorn Manor is where her brother vanished 10 years ago. No body, no clues, just an open door and his name whispered in the wind. The rotting wood creaks beneath her boots as she steps inside. The scent of damp earth and decay clings to the air. A chandelier, long dead, sways gently above, moved by an unseen force. The grand staircase looms ahead, its steps shrouded in darkness. As lightning flickers outside, shadows seem to shift, moving when she isn't looking. Eleanor swallows hard, her breath shallow. She tells herself she isn't afraid, but the weight in her chest says otherwise. Every rational thought screams for her to turn back, yet the unanswered questions of her past pull her deeper. Was it guilt, desperation, or something else entirely? She grips the locket around her neck, the only thing they ever found of her brother. As Eleanor moves forward, her flashlight beam catches a set of footprints in the dust, too fresh to be her brother's. She isn't alone. Then, from the depths of the house, a whisper slithers through the silence. Eleanor, where you finally came. The door slams shut behind her. As Eleanor steadies herself, the echo of the slammed door still ringing in her ears, a voice cuts through the darkness. You shouldn't be here. She spins, her flashlight landing on a figure standing near the base of the staircase. It's an older man, gaunt and wrapped in a tattered brown coat. His sunken eyes flicker with something unreadable. Fear, perhaps. Or warning. I didn't hear you come in, Eleanor says, pulse quickening. The man doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he studies her, as if weighing something in his mind. Finally, he sighs. Nobody hears me. Not anymore. Eleanor steps closer. Who are you? Caretaker, he mutters. Or what's left of one. He gestures toward the rotting walls. But this house don't need tending, not anymore. She watches him carefully. His hands tremble slightly and he refuses to meet her eyes for more than a few seconds. Whenever she tries to ask about the house, its history, the disappearances, his answers are vague, deflecting. But when she mentions her brother's name, his entire body stiffens. I don't know anything about that, he says too quickly. You should go before it gets worse. Before what gets worse? He turns away. It already knows you're here. A shuffling sound echoes from the floor above. Eleanor's head snaps up. The caretaker flinches. You heard that? She asks. He shakes his head. No, he says too fast. Then, you should leave. Eleanor isn't buying it. She slowly moves toward the stairs, her heart hammering. The steps groan under her weight, and with each one she can almost feel something watching her. The air grows heavier, thick with something wrong. At the landing, the hallway stretches into darkness. Then, just for a second. She swears she sees a shadow move at the far end. A gust of cold air rushes past her, sending a nearby door creaking. Open. Inside, the room is coated in dust, untouched for years, except for the writing scrawled across the mirror. Still here. And beneath it, on the dresser, lies something that makes her breath catch. Her brother's journal. The leather is cracked. The edge is worn, but there's no mistaking it. She flips it open. The last entry is hastily scrawled, almost illegible. I hear it at night. The whispering. It knows my name. I have to. The rest is smeared, as if someone had been dragged away before they could finish. A deep chill crawls up Eleanor's spine. She tightens her grip on the journal, torn between wanting to run and needing to know more. Behind her, the caretaker mutters something under his breath. She barely catches it. It always starts like this. Eleanor exhales, shakily. For the first time since she stepped into the manor, she wonders if she's made a terrible mistake. The journal feels heavier in Eleanor's hands than it should, as if it holds more than just words. She flips another page, but before she can read further, a gust of wind slams the door shut behind her. The room plunges into an unsettling stillness. Then, a whisper. Soft, almost too faint to catch. But she hears it. Eleanor. Her breath hitches. The flashlight in her grip flickers, its beam sputtering as if struggling against the darkness. She slowly sweeps the light across the room. Nothing. But when she looks back at the mirror, the words are gone. The glass is clean, pristine, as if they had never been there. A loud thump echoes from the hallway. She spins, her heart hammering. Something moved outside. Steeling herself, Eleanor pushes open the door, stepping carefully into the hallway. The caretaker is gone. The air is thick with silence, broken only by the occasional groan of the ancient house. As she moves, she notices something odd, the dust on the floor. Most of it is undisturbed except for a fresh set of footprints leading toward her, but none leading away. A chill snakes down her spine. She follows the prints cautiously. They lead to a room at the end of the hall, a door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, she finds what looks like an old study lined with decaying bookshelves. A fireplace sits cold and abandoned, its mantel covered in dust. But something is missing. The journal. She just had it. She turns sharply, scanning the room, when, bang! The window shutters slam open, a forceful wind rushing in. Papers swirl into tow. The air. Then in the dim light she sees it, a figure in the reflection of the glass. Eleanor spins around, but the room is empty. She staggers back, her pulse racing, when suddenly, the chandelier above trembles. Dust rains down. The floor creaks. Then, crash. A section of the ceiling caves in right where she was standing just moments before. She stumbles backward, coughing as the dust settles. Her mind races. That wasn't just bad luck. Someone wanted her dead. A voice from the doorway startles her. You almost got yourself killed. Eleanor whips around, finding a man standing there. A stranger in his 30s, rugged, with sharp eyes that scan the room. He wears a long coat, a satchel slung over his shoulder, and he doesn't look surprised by the destruction. Who the hell are you? Eleanor demands, still catching her breath. Daniel Cross, he says casually. And if you're smart, you'll leave while you still can. Eleanor narrows her eyes. You know something, don't you? Daniel exhales, stepping inside. More than I'd like to. She studies him, unsure if he's an ally or another layer of the mystery. Ignoring his warning, Eleanor's eyes drift across the room until something catches her attention. A small carved symbol on the back of the fireplace. It looks familiar. She's seen it before. Wait. She traces the edges of the symbol with her fingers. The moment she does, there's a faint click. A portion of the wall shifts. Dust spills from the seams. Eleanor and Daniel exchange a look. Tell me that's normal, she mutters. It's not. Taking a deep breath, she pushes against the panel, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, nestled beneath layers of dust, lies an ancient book bound in dark, cracked leather. The title is barely legible, but one word stands out. Sanctuary. Daniel's expression darkens. You shouldn't touch that. But Eleanor already knows. This book is a key to something bigger. The house, her brother's disappearance, the whispers, and whatever she just uncovered. It doesn't want to stay hidden. Eleanor carefully lifts the ancient book from its hiding place. Dust billows into the air as she flips through its brittle pages. The handwriting is jagged, rushed, like someone was desperately trying to record something before it was too late. Daniel leans in. That symbol on the cover, it's the same one carved into the entrance gate. Eleanor furrows her brow, scanning the pages until she finds something that makes her blood run cold. A drawing. It depicts the manor itself, but beneath it, in faded ink, is something else. A hidden passage leading deep underground. Scribbled, notes accompany the illustration. Sanctuary is below, but it is not safe. It watches. It waits. And once you hear the whisper, it never lets you go. Eleanor's breath catches. Sanctuary wasn't a place of safety. It was a trap. Daniel exhales sharply. This house wasn't abandoned. The people in it, they were taken. A soft creak echoes behind them. They are not alone. A shiver crawls up Eleanor's spine. She turns toward the doorway. At first, there's nothing, just darkness spilling in from the hall. Then, a figure steps forward. The caretaker. But something is wrong. His posture is stiff, unnatural. His head tilted at an odd angle. His eyes, dark, empty pits, stare right through her. Eleanor's pulse quickens. Mr. Owens? He doesn't respond. He takes a single, deliberate step closer. Daniel tenses beside her. That's not him. Another step. The dim light catches something wet smeared across the caretaker's shirt. Blood. Eleanor takes a step back. The caretaker smiles. Too wide, too unnatural. And then, in a voice that is not his own, he whispers, "You shouldn't have come." Then, he lunges. Eleanor barely has time to react before the caretaker grabs her wrist with unnatural strength. Ice shoots through her veins. His touch is wrong, like she's being pulled into something hollow and endless. Daniel shoves her aside just as the caretaker's other hand snaps toward her throat. The force slams the old man against the bookshelf, but he doesn't even flinch. His limbs jerk unnaturally as if something else is controlling him. The whispers in the air grow louder. Daniel grabs Eleanor's arm. "Run!" They burst out of the room, sprinting down the hallway. The air crackles with an unseen force. Doors, slamming shut behind them as if something is trying to trap them inside. Eleanor's mind races. The book, the sanctuary, the whispers. A thought clicks. They aren't being haunted. They're being hunted. They stumble down a back staircase, bursting into what appears to be a crumbling wine cellar. Daniel shines his flashlight around. "Where the hell do we go now?" Eleanor frantically scans the room. Then she sees it. A symbol matching the book's cover carved into the stone floor. She kneels, brushing away the dust. Beneath it, a metal ring, a hidden hatch. She yanks it open. A cold gust of air rushes up from the darkness below. The sound of distant whispers swirl beneath them. Daniel hesitates. That's a bad idea. Heavy footsteps thunder down the stairs. Behind them, Eleanor doesn't think. She jumps down. Daniel curses and follows just as the cellar door slams shut above them. They land in a stone tunnel, the walls lined with ancient symbols. The air is thick, wrong, like they've stepped into another world. A rusted lantern hangs on the wall, casting eerie shadows. Eleanor's heart pounds as she looks around. Then she notices something ahead, carved into the stone, barely visible in the dim light. The only way out is silence. Eleanor stares at the message, realization creeping in. The whispers. The voice in the dark. It doesn't want them to listen, it wants them to respond. She turns to Daniel. Whatever happens next, no matter what we hear, don't speak. A low echoing whisper snakes through the tunnel. Eleanor, come closer. And the shadows begin to move. Eleanor and Daniel press forward through the cold, damp tunnel, their footsteps muffled by layers of dust. The eerie whispers slither through, the air growing louder with every step. Then, the tunnel widens into a vast underground chamber. At the center stands a stone altar, its surface covered in strange markings. The air smells of burnt wax and something metallic, blood. Daniel's flashlight flickers as he scans the walls. Eleanor follows his gaze and freezes. Carvings. Twisted figures with hollow eyes and elongated mouths stare back at them, their faces frozen in silent screams. Beneath them, a single phrase scratched into the stone. Speak and it will claim you. A deep inhuman breath echoes from the darkness. Then it steps forward. A towering figure draped in tattered black robes. Its head tilts unnaturally. Its face, featureless except for a mouth, stitched shut with jagged, blackened thread. Yet, the whispers still come, from within it. Daniel grips Eleanor's arm. That's... Before he can finish, the creature raises one skeletal hand and the whispers turn into screams. The air shudders as unseen forces slam the chamber doors shut, locking them inside. Eleanor stumbles backward, clutching the book. Against her chest, Daniel grabs a rusted pipe from the ground, his knuckles white. We need to move now. But the creature doesn't rush. It waits, because it doesn't need to chase them. It only needs them to speak. A sudden movement from the shadows. Mr. Owens, the caretaker, emerges from the darkness. His lips are stitched just like the creature's, but his body jerks and twitches unnaturally like a puppet on invisible strings. His hands claw at his own throat as if fighting something inside him. His eyes lock onto Eleanor's. And then, in her own voice, he whispers, Eleanor, help me. Her. Breath catches, it's her voice, not his, it's mimicking her. Daniel grabs her wrist. Don't answer it. The whispers grow desperate. More voices now. Her mother's, her father's, even Daniel's. They all plead for help. The book trembles in her hands. The pages flip wildly, stopping on a single passage. To silence the nameless, one must embrace silence itself. A single line is underlined in dried, cracked ink. Seal the lips of the living before the whispers take root. Eleanor's stomach turns. There's only one way to stop it. They have to sew their own mouths shut. She turns to Daniel, eyes wide with realization. The creature lurches forward. Daniel shoves Eleanor behind him, swinging the pipe at the creature's face. It shatters like brittle glass, except there's no blood, only darkness spilling from the cracks. The shadows in the room pulse, and suddenly, Daniel's body goes rigid. Eleanor watches in horror as his eyes darken, his face twisting in pain. The whispers pour into him, his limbs jerking violently. And then, slowly, he turns toward her. A single tear escapes down his cheek. His lips part slightly, trembling, as though he's trying to fight it. But then, in a voice not his own, he whispers, "Run," and lunges at her. Eleanor screams silently, forcing herself to stay quiet as Daniel's hands claw at her throat. She fights back, pushing him away. He's strong, too strong. His fingers tighten, his own eyes wide with terror, as something else controls him. Her foot catches on a stone. She stumbles. The book flies from her hands, landing at the altar. The creature tilts its head, watching, waiting. She has seconds before it, kills her. Then, through the haze of panic, she remembers the carvings, the warning. The only way out is silence. She reaches into her jacket pocket, the sewing kit she found upstairs. Hands shaking, she grabs the needle and presses it against her lips. Her heart pounds. Daniel's grip tightens. She takes a final shuddering breath and stitches her mouth shut. The moment the thread pulls tight, the whispers stop. Daniel collapses. The creature lets out a deafening guttural shriek, its body convulsing as the shadows around it fracture. The altar cracks open, revealing an exit, a tunnel leading upward. Daniel coughs, his eyes clearing. Eleanor grabs his arm, yanking him toward the light. The creature reaches for them, its stitched mouth finally ripping open. But it's too late. They dive through the opening, and the stone slams shut behind them. Darkness. Silence. And then, they are free. But Eleanor knows one thing for certain. The whispers aren't gone. They are only waiting. The moment the stone door slams shut behind them, Eleanor and Daniel collapse onto the cold, damp floor of the forgotten catacombs. Their chests heave, their lungs burning from the sprint. For a moment, there is only silence. Then, a deep, guttural whisper vibrates through the tunnels. The creature isn't gone. It's following them. A cold wind rushes past, carrying a sickening chorus of voices, their own voices mimicking their breaths, their gasps, their desperate whispers. Daniel grips Eleanor's arm. We have to keep moving. But as they take their first step, the walls shudder. The stone above them groans, and from the darkness ahead, two hollow eyes blink open. They are not alone down here. Eleanor scans the tunnel. We need a distraction. Daniel pulls out his lighter and grabs a handful of dried vines hanging from the walls. With a flick of his thumb, the flame catches, the small fire illuminating twisted carvings all around them. Faces, mouths sewn shut. Staring back, they don't have time to think about it. The creature lurks closer, its inky form slithering through the tunnel, its movements unnatural, fragmented, as if it's skipping through reality itself. Daniel hurls the burning vines toward a pile of rotting wooden beams. The fire erupts, sending thick smoke curling through the air. For a brief moment, the whispers stutter, as if confused. Now. Eleanor tugs Daniel's arm, and they dash deeper into the catacombs. As they run, Eleanor's mind flashes back. She remembers sitting at her grandmother's bedside, watching the old woman sew a single black thread through a doll's lips. Some things must remain unspoken, Eleanor, or they will hear you. She had thought it was just an old woman's superstition, but now it's real. She glances at Daniel. His face is streaked with sweat and dirt, his jaw tight with fear. But his eyes are alive with determination. For years, she had pushed people away, convinced she could handle things alone. But Daniel had stayed. She reaches for his hand, for the first time, letting herself hold on. The tunnels begin to narrow, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. The air thickens, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. Then, a shadow rushes past them. Eleanor gasps, twisting around. The creature isn't behind them anymore. It's ahead, waiting. Daniel freezes, his breath catching. It's hurting us. Eleanor's mind races. They can't go back, and they can't go forward. The stone walls are smooth. No handholds, no way out. Then her eyes land on the carvings again. The figures, their mouths sewn shut, and something clicks. The walls, she breathes. They're a warning. Daniel frowns. What? She presses, a hand against the stone. It's soft, not stone at all, but something else. It shifts beneath her touch like flesh. The carvings aren't etched in. They're pushing through. She jerks her hand back. The walls, they're alive. The whispers spike, and suddenly, the tunnel starts closing in. The walls pulse, as if breathing. They have seconds. Eleanor yanks the sewing needle from her pocket and stabs the nearest face. It recoils, the whispering, voice behind it snapping into silence. Daniel gets it immediately. He grabs the rusty pipe and starts slashing at the walls. Each time they break a stitched mouth open, the whispering fades, and the tunnel loosens. The creature screeches in fury, its form distorting, as if it's losing control of the space around. Then Eleanor spots a faint light ahead, an exit. She grabs Daniel's hand and they run toward it. The creature lunges, its elongated fingers inches from Eleanor's throat. She throws the sewing kit behind her. The creature's eyes snap to it. Its mouth, once sewn shut, rips open in a soundless howl as it's sucked into the walls, trapped with the voices it once controlled. And then, silence. Eleanor and Daniel burst into the open, collapsing onto the forest floor beneath the shattered ruins of the manor. The morning sun filters through the trees. They are alive. But deep in the ruins, the whispers still linger, because secrets never stay buried for long. Eleanor and Daniel barely have time to catch their breath. The sun may be rising, but the whispers haven't stopped. A low rumble echoes beneath them, the ground shaking as if the manor itself is awakening. Then, the shadows move. A tall, faceless figure rises from the ruined entrance, its body twisting, unnaturally, its limbs elongating like smoke caught in slow motion. The creature is not defeated. It was never just a ghost. It is the manor. The whispering voices, the shifting walls, the suffocating presence, all were pieces of it, and now it wants them back inside. The ground cracks, pulling them toward the ruin's mouth. Daniel grabs Eleanor's arm, but his eyes widen in horror. His fingers are disappearing. His skin is dissolving into the whispers. Eleanor watches in terror as Daniel's body begins to fade, like ink bleeding into parchment. It's not pulling them back in, it's absorbing them. Then, a new voice joins. The whispers. A familiar voice. Some things must remain unspoken, Eleanor, or they will hear you. Eleanor's blood runs cold. Her grandmother. She sees it now. The manor isn't just feeding on fear, it feeds on secrets. The longer something is hidden, the stronger it becomes. And Eleanor, she's been running from the truth her whole life. She turns to Daniel. His eyes are pleading, his mouth moving silently, but his voice is gone. No, she won't lose him. Eleanor clenches her fists. No more secrets, she screams, not in fear, but in defiance. I know what you are. The air shudders. The whispers snarl. I know what you've done. The shadows recoil. The manor screeches. Eleanor rips open the sewing kit, the same one her grandmother had used to keep their family's past buried, and scatters the needles and thread into the air. The whispers crack like splintering glass. Daniel reappears, gasping, clutching his throat. The manor writhes, its form fracturing, pieces of forgotten voices escaping into the morning sky. Stories finally being told. With one final shuddering wail, the ruins implode, collapsing into dust. The whispers fade. The air is silent. For the first time in years, Eleanor's mind feels light, as if a weight she never realized she carried is finally gone. Daniel looks at her, worn but alive. They did it. But as they stare at the ruins, Eleanor knows the manor isn't truly gone, because secrets don't die. They just wait. A week later, Eleanor stands before her grandmother's grave. She doesn't bring flowers. She brings truth. I know what happened here, she whispers. And this time, she doesn't, so her lips shut. A month has passed since the manor collapsed. Eleanor sits in her small apartment staring at her grandmother's old sewing kit, the same one she once feared. She's changed. The nightmares are less frequent now. The whispers have stopped. For the first time, she isn't running from the past, but she isn't at peace either, because some secrets never die. As Eleanor places the sewing kit in a drawer, she notices something. The old wooden lid is slightly ajar. She's certain she closed it last night. A chill creeps up her spine as she reaches inside, fingers brushing against something that wasn't there before. A piece of thread, black, frayed, and knotted in a way that feels too deliberate. Her breath catches. She slowly unravels it, revealing a tiny slip of parchment hidden inside. 2 words, scrawled in her grandmother's handwriting. Not yet. A faint sound drifts through the room. A whisper. Shh. Eleanor's eyes widen. The screen cuts to black. In the end, Eleanor didn't destroy the manor. She only unlocked the truth. But now she understands she must keep telling it, because if she doesn't, the whispers will find someone else. Outside Eleanor's window, the fog is thick. Across the street, a new construction project has begun. Bulldozers clearing the ruins of the old manor. A worker pauses, brushing dust from a half-buried wooden door. The whisper is faint, but unmistakable. Eleanor stands at her window, watching the ruins of the manor being cleared away. Her fingers tighten around the parchment she found inside the sewing kit. She reads the words again. Not yet. Her reflection in the glass seems off. She tilts her head. Her reflection does not. A question forms in her mind, unshakable and terrifying. What if the manor wasn't haunted? What if it was a cage? And now, it's been opened. A faint whisper brushes against her ear. Thank you. The lights flicker. In the reflection behind her, a dark figure shifts. Eleanor whirls around. There's nothing there. Eleanor slowly places the parchment back into the sewing kit. She considers throwing it away, burning it. Instead, she closes the lid and walks away. Behind her, unseen, the lid nudges open just an inch. A single black thread slithers out. The screen cuts to black. A whisper lingers in the darkness. Hello? What do you think really happened? Did Eleanor escape the whispers? Or did she release them? Would you dare step inside the manor? Let me know your theories in the comments below.